I'm making this planter with cedar fence pickets, but I'll be doing some milling because I want a different board size. And I'm starting off by planing to a 1/2 inch. This is optional though, you could adjust some measurements later if you don't have a planer. Rather than using my joiner, I use a table saw to shave clean edges on the boards to try to get them as straight as possible before ripping them down to 2.5 inch strips. For the next step, I use a framing square and a combo square to figure out the diameter of my bucket, which is 11 1/4, but I'm using 11 3/8 for extra space. I'm starting with the leg pieces, which I'm cutting out 8 pieces at 12.5 inches, but I'm using a 3.5 gallon bucket, so for a 5 gallon bucket you may need extra height. But then I cut out horizontal slats, 16 of them at 11 7/8. That's a bucket width plus board thickness. And lastly, I have to cut out 4 pieces at 13 7/8, which is the bucket width and 4 times the board thickness. To prepare for assembly, I'm drawing an offset on all of the leg pieces. I'm using the board thickness and just drawing a line on one edge of each leg. The idea here is the 4 slats connect to the leg pieces, just offset from the edge by that marking. Now all 4 sides are the same, so for assembly it's pretty easy. I have 2 legs, and I'm using glue and 18 gauge 1/4 inch narrow crown staples to connect all the pieces. And 1/4 inch being the width of the staple, not the length. That depends on your board thickness, of course. I always start with the top piece because that always seems to be easiest to get everything lined up nice and square. And then the remaining pieces, it's as easy as butting them up against the top, just eyeballing to make sure they're lined up, and then continuing down, stapling all of them in place. Now all 4 sides are the same, so you just repeat that for all the sides. And then for assembly, there's a trick here to make sure it's square. Now all of these pieces are going to interlock with each other, but you want to make sure those slats are bumping against the next piece all in the same direction. If you do that, then you'll get a square in the center. To make it easier on myself so I'm not screwing up the order, I like to go 1 piece at a time. I glue, and then I fit together and staple facing the same way and holding it in the same orientation every single time, and that makes it a lot easier to get the perfect square, but it's always good to check it once you're done. And while we're at it, before finishing the border, it's good to check it with the bucket to make sure that does in fact still fit. Next, I move on to the border. I'm marking off 1/2 inch offset just to give myself space to staple the border to the box. Now for adding the border, I'm using glue and staples just like the rest of it. And what I do is I align one edge flush, and then the opposite edge that's going to overhang. But it's going to overhang the board thickness, which means after this first piece is secured in place, the remaining pieces are super easy because you just butt them up to one edge and then staple them in place. And you do that all the way around, then you end up with a nice square border going around the whole thing. And that's it. The border is just enough to hide most of the bucket. You can make the border taller if you want, but this way the handle is still easily accessible.